Something that they weren't expecting, something that should never happen, just did, and it was right in front of them. The truck's name was Samson and Holman's Beast. They had just finished a routine where they raced to jump over a line of cars at the Monster Nationals Monster Truck Show in Madison, Wisconsin. The truck drivers were trained professionals, and they had completed this maneuver hundreds, if not thousands of times in the past. Normally, when they complete a stunt, the announcer, who is effectively a hype man, would come across the loudspeaker and with flashy wording, describe what they just saw. See, the announcer's role is to keep the crowds excited while the trucks reset and new stunts are set up. And with a good announcer, you would never even know that a change had taken place on the arena. And on this day, George Eisenhart Jr. was manning the microphone, and he was one of the best. George had been doing it for 15 years, and he won multiple awards, including 5 different times for Promoter of the Year. The Alliant Arena in Madison, Wisconsin, where the event was taking place, had 6 monster trucks on the floor. One would come out and perform a spinning burnout donut where the front tires would leave the ground, and then it would launch down the arena as fast as it could, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. The crowd went wild, and George worked him with the microphone. And the cheers continued until Samson and Holman's Beast revved their engines. It was deafening. The 2 giant trucks lined up next to each other with 5 cars side to side in front of them. Their mission was to jump over these trucks and land on the other side. First to do so would win the match. So the 12,000-pound trucks launched like missiles. They shot up about 10 feet in the air when they hit the first car, and they both kind of rather uneventfully landed on the other side, with Holman's Beast edging out Samson. And with Holman's Beast making it to the end of the track first, it started to turn around and come back towards the beginning, which Samson then pulled in behind him and followed him back to the starting area. And many times when drivers would finish their event, they would drive their trucks right next to the arena edge so that the spectators could see how big the truck was, hear how loud they were, and just get an idea for just the sheer scale of what these trucks were. George grabbed his microphone and prepared to walk out to announce the winner of the race, kind of recap what happened, and set the crowd up for what was going to happen next. And as he was preparing himself in the tunnel, he watched the truck drive by, and then he stepped out into the arena as he looked to his left to watch the truck. But George mistimed his move, and unfortunately only one truck had passed, that being Holman's Beast. Samson was bearing down at him just feet away, and with these 6-foot tires, the driver of Samson couldn't see that he was there. And unfortunately, George was struck on his right side and run over by the giant truck. Medics ran to George, but he already had massive internal injuries, and he was in what's considered critical condition. They rushed him to the University of Wisconsin Hospital, where he would be unfortunately pronounced dead at 11:32 p.m., less than 2 hours from when he was first hit. George Eisenhart Jr. was 41 years old. He was a loving husband and father of 2 children. A military search and rescuer is lowered down a very narrow, dark tunnel, inching his way toward the bottom nearly 200 feet below. The walls are loose and the rocks are falling off on top of him with each move forward he makes. The rope brushes against one of the side walls, triggering it loose as it careens down and hits him in the head. It breaks his hard hat in half before he's pulled back to the surface. The team had to come up with a new way of trying to rescue the dying man down below. Hours earlier, Devin, an off-duty geothermal driller, was exploring an abandoned mine shaft below the Mount Battle, Nevada area with some friends. A week earlier, another drill team found the mine shaft, explored it for several hours, and then passed the information of its location on to Devin's team. Now, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of mine shafts in this area, but this was a new one that they had never heard of before, so it was something worth exploring. Devin was the leader of his geothermal team, and so he was also naturally leading this exploratory team. And as they were working their way towards the mine shaft, they got closer to the edge and started working their way down in it. And at about 12 o'clock that afternoon, Devin's foot slipped off the edge and he fell down the mine shaft. His friends froze and they were in shock at what they just saw. Devin had slipped inside and he was gone. They yelled for him. They were trying to get his attention to figure out where he was, but there was no response, and they had no idea if Devin was alive or dead. In an attempt to save what was left of Devin, if he was still alive, They ran back to their drilling rig and got some rope to lower somebody down. So when they made it back to the mine shaft, they fashioned a kind of makeshift harness, and then one of the thermal drillers would rappel down into the mine shaft to try to figure out where Devin was at. But the deeper they went, the darker it got, and they weren't able to see Devin anywhere. Eventually, they ran out of rope and they had to crawl their way back to the surface. The local police were notified what happened, and they quickly put together a support team of 12 different rescue operations. They had gold mining companies, they had land management companies, they had rescue operation teams, they had mineral businesses. They had anybody in the area that knew how to try to rescue this person come out and assist with the rescue. Unsure if Devin was dead or alive, they assessed the situation, and it was very late at night, so it put the rescuer team at more risk to try to rescue him late at night. So they came back early in the morning and attempted to locate where he was at. First, they lowered night vision cameras into the mine shaft to try to identify where Devin was at and if he was still alive. So they lowered him down 40 feet and then 80 feet. The team was very nervous at this point. The human body is not designed to fall and survive from that height. They made it to 120, 160. Finally, they were able to locate him at 190 feet down. When the camera found Devin, it didn't know his condition, so it got really close, and when it did, Devin raised his arm, and by some miracle, he was still alive. But the rescuers could see that the condition he was in was very dire. Both of his shoulders were broken, he had a broken jaw, and he was breathing very heavily but very shallow, which indicated to the rescuers he probably had a punctured lung. With this information, they left the camera in that area to keep an eye on Devin as they came up with new game plans. So they put together plans to either rappel down, but the walls were very loose and rocks kept falling in. The shaft was too narrow to be able to put a basket and a person in it. So, running out of options, they finally decided to lower a Navy rescuer down the mine shaft to try to attempt to save Devin. But as he was going down, his rope had brushed against the wall of the mine, which dislodged a rock and it fell on top of him, breaking his hard hat in half and giving him a concussion. The plan for him to dive down was abandoned and he was pulled back to the surface. Rescuers were now out of safe ideas to save Devin. They couldn't rappel down, they couldn't lower a basket, he was no longer conscious, and so the idea of giving him food or water was out of question as well, and he was in critical condition. The final image of Devin was taken 39 hours after he fell in. While Devin was still technically alive, rescue operations were called off, and Devin Westenskow left behind a fiancé and 2 children. Personally, I don't like caramel unless it's in my coffee, but hundreds of millions worldwide love caramel, and with its main ingredient just sugar, who could blame them? The process for making caramel is very simple. Combine sugar, water, heat until a boil, mix in some milk, salt, butter, let it cool, and voila, caramel. This isn't a story though on how to make caramel or how delicious it is. It's about the lack of safety regulations at a caramel processing plant and how those decisions to forego safety brutally killed a wife and mother. Stary Oskol is a small city in Russia, about 370 miles south of Moscow, and it's home to the Slavyanka Sweets Factory. They specialize in all sorts of confectionery treats, chocolate being their largest, but they also mix, heat, and process caramel to either go on top or inside some of their chocolate treats. On October 26, 2017, the plant was buzzing along as it always does. There were induction ovens increasing the product temperature to 340 degrees Fahrenheit, mixing bowls capable of holding hundreds of gallons of ingredients with a stirring wand in the center, stirring up the next batch. Think of your KitchenAid stand mixer, but about 500 times larger. These cooking tools required staff to work very close to them to monitor for ingredient changes or if there was any maintenance that had to be performed on a piece of machinery. And then there were also cleaning staff who would come in and after a batch was completed, they would clean up the equipment and make it ready for the next batch, or if they were changing batches. On this day, Natalia Nemets was cleaning different cooking machines around the plant. She would work her way around the plant, eventually ending up at the mixing bowls, cleaning each one as they became available and then moving on to the next. On one of her mixing bowls, she noticed there was a foreign object in the bottom, and she leaned into that mixing bowl to grab the foreign object and pull it out before the next batch came in. What she didn't know, though, is that by going into the mixing container, it triggered an automatic system to bring the caramel in and turn on the mixing blades. And by doing so, 520 gallons of boiling hot 340 degree Fahrenheit caramel rushed into the bowl that she was in, straight from the furnace, which pinned her into the bottom of this container. Then the mixing blades turned on and mixed her into the caramel. She died in one of the most brutal, unimaginable ways possible. Her coworkers didn't even know that she was in trouble. She didn't make any sounds. The caramel had poured over her before she could even make a noise. One of the workers had to watch Natalia in the caramel mix for more than 10 seconds before the machine would be turned off. The 36-year-old Natalia was a married woman with a 10-year-old child. Thank you everyone for staying this far. Hopefully you enjoyed today's storytelling, and if you did, don't forget to like the video below, subscribe to the channel, and do that bell thing. Also, I post daily short stories on TikTok. You can follow me at Mr. No Sleep TV. Again, thank you for all of your support, and until next time, see ya.